At 19, the black girl was sold as damaged goods until the silent cowboy learned who damaged her. $50 for the cursed one, the auctioneer bellows as the trembling girl stands chained to the auction block. The crowd sneers at her alleged madness, whispering of fits and evil omens that follow her shadow. They assume she'll waste away in servitude, another broken soul discarded by civilized society. But the weathered cowboy watching from the back sees something else, intelligence flickering behind her supposed affliction. He raises his hand to bid, not knowing her strange episodes hold the key to a conspiracy that has already claimed dozens of lives across the territory. Her visions reveal fragments of murders disguised as disappearances, and those responsible will kill again to protect their secret. Will uncovering the truth about who truly damaged her destroy them both, or finally set them free? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The Morrison house stood like a monument to prosperity on Copper Ridge's main street. Inside its polished walls, Amara swept the floors with mechanical precision. Her dark hands moved steadily across the wooden planks, while her mind wandered to places far beyond these confines. She had lived here for 3 years. 3 years of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. 3 years of nervous glances when she spoke of dreams that felt too real. The episodes had started after her arrival, vivid flashes of events that hadn't happened yet. She learned quickly to keep these visions to herself, but sometimes the images burst from her lips before she could stop them. Mrs. Morrison entered the parlor with her usual suspicious gaze. The woman's eyes followed Amara's every movement, searching for signs of the strangeness that plagued their household. Thomas Morrison, the family's eldest son, burst through the front door. Dust covered his mining clothes, and excitement lit his face. His mother smiled at his arrival. His father emerged from the study, papers in hand. The family gathered in their familiar circle of prosperity and planning. Amara continued sweeping, but her vision blurred. The parlor shifted around her. Thomas stood in the same spot, but darkness surrounded him. Water rushed past his boots. Timber creaked overhead. His face twisted in terror as the mine shaft collapsed. She gasped and dropped the broom. The Morrison family turned toward her. Thomas laughed at her clumsiness. His parents exchanged the look she had learned to fear. 2 weeks later, the mine claimed Thomas Morrison's life exactly as she had seen. The funeral procession wound through Copper Ridge's dusty streets. Amara watched from the Morrison house window as the town gathered to mourn. She had tried to warn them, but her words fell on ears that refused to hear. Mrs. Morrison appeared beside her at the window. The woman's grief had transformed into something harder and more dangerous. Sheriff Edwin Marsh climbed the front steps that evening. His badge caught the lamplight as he removed his hat in the parlor. Amara served coffee while the adults spoke in hushed tones about curses and bad omens. The sheriff's eyes found hers across the room. Something flickered in his expression, fear mixed with calculation. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted the coffee cup. Miss Lulabelle Grayson arrived the next morning. The town's most respected matron carried herself with the authority of someone who shaped opinions and directed conversations. Her visit lasted 3 hours. Amara cleaned the dishes after Miss Grayson departed. Through the kitchen window, she watched the woman stop at 3 different houses on her walk home. Each visit was brief but purposeful. By evening, the decision was made. Mr. Morrison called Amara into his study. Legal papers covered his desk. His wife stood beside him with arms crossed and lips pressed thin. They spoke of financial difficulties and necessary changes. They mentioned her unsettling behavior and the town's growing discomfort. They used words like unfortunate and unavoidable while describing her future. The auction would happen in 3 days. News traveled fast through Copper Ridge. Amara felt the shift in how people looked at her during her final errands. Whispers followed her down the street. Mothers pulled their children closer when she passed. She understood now that her gift was seen as a curse. The ability to glimpse future tragedies made her dangerous in a world that preferred its surprises to remain hidden. The morning of the auction arrived with merciless sunshine. Amara wore her only decent dress and kept her eyes down as the Morrison family prepared for the day's business. The town square filled with curious onlookers and potential buyers. A wooden platform served as the auction block. Several other items waited to be sold first, giving Amara time to study the crowd. Most faces showed casual interest or mild disgust. She recognized shopkeepers and farmers who had watched her episodes with growing alarm. Their expressions revealed they considered her presence a threat to their community's peace. One face stood apart from the rest. A tall cowboy leaned against a post at the crowd's edge. His weathered features suggested a life spent outdoors. His clothes were clean but worn. Most notably, he watched everything with careful attention. Silas Boone had arrived in Copper Ridge 2 months earlier. The townspeople knew little about him except that he worked hard and spoke rarely. Some assumed he couldn't speak at all. His silence came from a childhood accident that damaged his vocal cords. He had learned to communicate through observation and action instead of words. This forced quietness had taught him to see things others missed. Today, he watched the crowd's reactions more than the auction itself. He noted which people seemed nervous about Amara's presence and which appeared genuinely curious about her alleged abilities. Sheriff Marsh fidgeted near the platform. Miss Grayson positioned herself where she could observe every potential bidder. Both adults showed more investment in these proceedings than a simple servant auction would normally warrant. The auctioneer called Amara forward. She climbed the wooden steps with as much dignity as she could gather. The crowd's murmur rose around her like a tide. Her knees shook as the bidding began. The opening price met no takers. The auctioneer lowered his expectations twice before finding modest interest. 3 men offered half-hearted bids. Their expressions suggested they viewed her as a risky investment at best. The price dropped steadily as enthusiasm waned. Silas straightened from his post. Something about this scene struck him as wrong. The girl's composure under pressure impressed him. The way certain townspeople watched her suggested hidden knowledge rather than simple gossip. His hand rose from his side. The auctioneer's hammer fell with finality. Amara belonged to the silent cowboy now. Silas led Amara through Copper Ridge's dusty streets toward his cabin on the town's outskirts. Curious eyes tracked their movement from windows and doorways. The silent cowboy and his purchased burden made an unusual pair. The cabin sat modest and clean among scattered pine trees. One room served multiple purposes with careful efficiency. A small table, 2 chairs, and a bed occupied the space without crowding it. Books lined a wooden shelf near the window. Amara stood uncertain in the doorway. Her experience with men who owned her had taught caution. Silas gestured toward a chair and moved to prepare coffee. His actions held no threat or demand. He placed a cup before her and took paper from a drawer. His pencil moved across the surface in careful letters. He turned the paper toward her. The words read simple and direct. "You are safe here. What do you need?" She stared at the message. No one had asked about her needs in years. The kindness felt foreign and potentially dangerous. Over the following days, Silas established routines that included her comfort. He prepared meals without expecting her service. He offered the bed while he slept on the floor. His written communications asked about her preferences rather than issuing commands. The townspeople visited with warnings and advice. Mrs. Henderson from the general store shook her head while describing Amara's unpredictable episodes. She detailed the strange pronouncements and wild-eyed stares that had frightened customers. Pastor Williams arrived with biblical concerns about harboring darkness. He spoke of evil influences and spiritual contamination. His words painted Amara as a threat to Silas's immortal soul. Dr. Fletcher offered medical opinions about female hysteria and unbalanced humors. He suggested treatments involving restraints and isolation. His clinical tone made Amara sound like a disease requiring cure. Silas listened to each visitor with polite attention. He nodded appropriately and wrote brief responses. His manner gave no indication of his true thoughts about their warnings. After each departure, he observed Amara's reactions. She showed no signs of the madness others described. Her responses to situations seemed logical and measured. Her intelligence shone through conversations despite her obvious caution. 3 days into their arrangement, they encountered Sheriff Marsh in town. The lawman approached with his usual friendly demeanor, but Silas noticed tension in his shoulders and quickness in his speech. Amara's behavior changed the moment she saw the sheriff. Her breathing quickened, and her eyes grew distant. The transformation happened so suddenly that nearby shoppers stepped back in alarm. She began speaking in a voice that carried across the street. Her words described an argument between the sheriff and a family of farmers. She mentioned raised voices and threats about land sales. She spoke of fear and desperate flight in the darkness. The crowd gathered to witness another episode from the cursed girl. They exchanged knowing looks about her affliction and its dangerous unpredictability. Several people made protective gestures or moved their children away. Sheriff Marsh's face had gone pale during her pronouncements. His hand rested on his gun belt, and sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool morning air. His reaction seemed far too intense for mere superstitious concern. Silas guided Amara away from the crowd. Her episode ended as abruptly as it had begun. She walked normally beside him, showing no signs of confusion or distress. Back at the cabin, Silas wrote questions about what had happened. Amara read his words and made a decision that would change everything between them. She looked directly into his eyes and spoke in a clear, steady voice. Her words carried none of the wild disconnection the town expected from her. I see things that haven't happened yet. Sometimes things that already happened but were hidden. The sheriff killed the Patterson family when they wouldn't sell their farm. He buried them in the old mine shaft east of town. Silas sat motionless, absorbing this revelation. The girl everyone dismissed as insane had just confessed to supernatural abilities and accused the local sheriff of murder. Amara continued her explanation. The visions came without warning, triggered by proximity to people involved in significant events. The Morrison family had sold her because she accurately predicted their son's death. Her previous episodes had revealed other hidden truths that made powerful people uncomfortable. She had learned to play up the madness aspect of her gift. People feared insane proclamations less than they feared accurate prophecies. Pretending complete disconnection from reality provided some protection from those who might exploit or eliminate her abilities. The Patterson family had vanished 3 months earlier. Official reports claimed they had moved west to join relatives. Their farm now belonged to the bank, which had sold it to unnamed buyers for development. Silas wrote careful questions about her visions. Could she control them? Did they always come true? How much detail did she see? Amara explained the limitations of her gift. The visions came in fragments, often lacking context or clear time frames. She could sometimes focus them through concentration, but strong emotions or proximity to significant events triggered them unpredictably. Her abilities had developed after a childhood trauma she preferred not to discuss. The visions had grown stronger and more frequent over the years. The Morrison family's fear had been building for months before Thomas's death confirmed their worst suspicions. Silas absorbed this information while studying her face. Nothing in her manner suggested deception or delusion. Her explanations followed logical patterns and addressed practical concerns about her abilities. He wrote a new message and slid it across the table. I believe you. We need to find out what really happened to the Patterson family. Amara felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in years, someone had listened to her truth without fear or dismissal. The silent cowboy had become her unlikely ally in a world that saw her as damaged goods. Their partnership began that evening with careful planning and shared determination. Silas and Amara began their investigation with careful observation around Copper Ridge. They visited the former Patterson property, now marked with surveyor stakes and development plans. The farmhouse stood empty, but undamaged, suggesting the family had left quickly rather than gradually. Amara touched the front door and closed her eyes. Visions flickered behind her eyelids like candle flames in wind. She saw the Patterson family huddled together in their kitchen while heavy boots approached outside. Fear radiated from their faces as Sheriff Marsh's voice carried through the walls. The images shifted to show the family's desperate flight through darkness. They carried hastily packed belongings and led their children by hand. But the vision ended in violence that made Amara gasp and step away from the door. Silas watched her reaction and wrote questions about what she had seen. Amara described the fragments carefully, noting details about timing and location. The family had tried to escape, but never made it beyond the county line. They expanded their investigation to other properties that had changed hands recently. The Miller farm showed similar signs of sudden abandonment. The widow Thompson's cottage now belonged to the bank after her mysterious departure. Each location triggered visions that painted the same pattern of intimidation followed by disappearance. Miss Grayson's involvement became clearer through Amara's expanding abilities. Visions showed the respectable matron visiting families before their troubles began. She carried lists of names and property values. Her conversations always included veiled threats about community acceptance and safety. The woman used her social position to gather information about family finances and personal weaknesses. She identified which households might resist pressure to sell their land. Her reports went directly to Sheriff Marsh, who took action based on her recommendations. Silas documented their findings in detailed notes while Amara refined her control over the visions. She learned to focus her abilities on specific questions and timeframes. The partnership between his methodical observation and her supernatural insight proved remarkably effective. Their activities attracted attention from the townspeople. Silas's reputation had been solid before his association with the cursed girl. Now whispers followed him through the streets about being influenced by her dark powers. Dr. Fletcher approached him outside the bank with medical concerns. The doctor suggested that prolonged exposure to Amara's condition might affect his mental stability. He offered treatments that could protect Silas from spiritual contamination. Pastor Williams delivered similar warnings wrapped in biblical language. He spoke of corruption spreading from person to person like a plague. His sermons began including references to false prophets and demonic influences. The social pressure intensified when Mrs. Henderson refused to sell supplies to Silas. Other merchants followed her example, forcing him to travel to neighboring towns for necessities. The isolation tactics were coordinated and deliberate. Amara recognized the pattern from her visions of other targeted families. The community pressure was designed to force compliance or drive out troublesome residents. She and Silas were experiencing the early stages of the process that had eliminated the Pattersons and others. During one of their evening planning sessions, Amara's abilities triggered an unexpected vision. She saw Silas surrounded by armed men in the darkness near the old mine shaft. His life hung in immediate danger from the same forces that had claimed the missing families. The vision's clarity and urgency differed from her usual fragmentary glimpses. She could see specific details about the location and timing of the threat. The danger would come within days rather than weeks or months. Silas read her description of the vision with growing concern. The details suggested that their investigation had been discovered, and countermeasures were being planned. Someone wanted to eliminate them before they could expose the conspiracy. They decided to accelerate their efforts rather than retreat from the danger. Amara focused her visions on finding evidence that could prove their accusations. She needed to locate the missing families or documentation of the land scheme. Her abilities led them to the old mine shaft east of town. The location had appeared in multiple visions connected to the disappeared families. Recent digging marked the area despite its supposed abandonment years earlier. Silas examined the disturbed earth while Amara experienced her most powerful vision yet. She saw not just the Patterson family's fate, but glimpses of other victims buried in the same location. The scope of the murders stretched back over 2 years. The vision expanded to show the broader conspiracy. The railroad company had commissioned Sheriff Marsh and Miss Grayson to clear problematic landowners from the planned route. Families who refused reasonable offers received escalating pressure until they either fled or faced permanent elimination. Dozens of properties across multiple counties had been acquired through this system. The missing families represented only the most stubborn cases where intimidation had failed. The majority of targeted landowners had sold quickly and moved away after receiving appropriate motivation. Amara's family appeared in the final fragments of her vision. She saw them refusing offers for their valuable property near the river. She witnessed their elimination and her own sale as damaged goods to hide the evidence of their murder. The personal revelation staggered her, but it also provided crucial information about the conspiracy's methods and scope. Her family's land had been the first acquisition in Copper Ridge, establishing the pattern that would claim many others. Silas supported her through the emotional impact of learning her family's true fate. Then, they planned their response to the immediate threat her vision had revealed. The confrontation at the mine shaft would happen tomorrow night. They had one day to gather allies or evidence before the conspiracy moved to silence them permanently. Amara spent the morning focusing her visions beyond Copper Ridge's boundaries. The images that came revealed a conspiracy stretching across 3 counties along the planned railroad route. Each town had its own version of Sheriff Marsh and Miss Grayson coordinating the systematic removal of resistant landowners. In Millerville, the banker worked with the mayor to foreclose on properties after mysterious crop failures. Riverside's doctor declared families mentally unfit while the judge seized their assets for public safety. The methods varied, but the results remained consistent. Silas documented the expanding scope while calculating the financial scale. Hundreds of properties had changed hands at below-market prices. The railroad company would save millions in acquisition costs through their coordinated intimidation campaign. The personal cost became clearer as Amara's visions revealed more missing families. The Hendersons from Millerville had vanished after refusing to sell their mill. The young Calloway family from Riverside disappeared following their public complaints about unfair pressure tactics. Each case followed the same progression from negotiation to intimidation to elimination. Amara's abilities allowed her to see the network's communication methods. Messages traveled between towns through seemingly innocent channels. Miss Grayson's correspondence with her sister in Millerville contained coded references to problem properties and necessary solutions. The preacher's visits to neighboring parishes carried verbal instructions about timing and coordination. The revelation about her own family's murder became clearer through focused visions. Her parents had owned prime river frontage that the railroad needed for a crucial bridge crossing. Their refusal to sell had threatened the entire route's viability in that section. Sheriff Marsh had eliminated her family during a staged robbery that left no survivors except the child found wandering in shock. Amara's traumatic experience had triggered her supernatural abilities while erasing her memories of the attack. Her sale as damaged goods had removed the last witness while providing cover for the property transfer. The trauma had affected her memory so completely that she had believed the official story about plague deaths. Only now could she see the truth behind her family's fate and her own mysterious abilities. Silas recognized the emotional weight of these discoveries on Amara. She carried not just her own grief, but knowledge of dozens of other families who had suffered similar fates. Her gift had become a repository for hidden injustices that demanded resolution. Their investigation faced increasing obstacles as the conspiracy responded to their activities. The general store refused them service entirely. The livery stable owner claimed no horses were available for rent. Even the church ladies who usually showed Christian charity turned cold and unwelcoming. Miss Grayson orchestrated the social isolation with practiced efficiency. Her network of influence reached every household and business in Copper Ridge. She presented their ostracism as community protection against dangerous influences rather than coordinated intimidation. Dr. Fletcher made house calls to several families, discussing the medical dangers of exposure to supernatural afflictions. His warnings carried the weight of scientific authority and created genuine fear about contamination from Amara's presence. Pastor Williams held special prayer meetings focused on protecting the community from demonic influences. His sermons painted Silas as a victim of spiritual corruption who needed intervention before he became completely lost to evil forces. The pressure campaign showed the same sophisticated coordination that had eliminated previous troublemakers. Every aspect of their daily life became difficult or impossible as the community united against their continued presence. Amara experienced visions of their own planned elimination that revealed specific details about timing and methods. Sheriff Marsh intended to stage their deaths as a tragic accident at the old mine shaft. Their bodies would join the hidden graves of previous victims, while the community mourned the loss of 2 souls claimed by supernatural evil. The vision showed Miss Grayson preparing the aftermath narrative that would explain their disappearance. She would describe warning signs everyone had missed and tragic consequences of failing to intervene sooner. The story would serve as a cautionary tale while covering the truth about their murder. Silas and Amara realized they needed allies to survive the approaching confrontation. Their investigation had identified other potential victims who might join their cause if presented with evidence of the conspiracy. The Brennan family had recently received offers for their property that seemed generous, but came with subtle threats about community acceptance. Their teenage son had been arrested on suspicious charges that could escalate if his parents proved uncooperative. Old Samuel Tucker owned mineral rights that blocked development plans for a crucial section of railroad. His isolated cabin made him vulnerable to the same treatment that had claimed other resistant landowners. Widow Martinez had inherited valuable grazing land that she refused to sell despite increasing pressure from bank representatives and town officials. Her late husband's debts were being called in simultaneously to create financial desperation. Amara's visions revealed that all three families were scheduled for escalating pressure within days. Their cases would follow the established pattern unless the conspiracy could be exposed and stopped immediately. The challenge lay in convincing potential allies that an incredible supernatural conspiracy was targeting them for elimination. Most people would dismiss such claims as the ravings of the cursed girl and her corrupted companion. Silas proposed using Amara's visions to provide specific evidence that each family could verify independently. Predictions about immediate future events would establish her credibility while demonstrating the reality of their shared danger. They had less than 24 hours to gather allies and evidence before the conspiracy moved to eliminate them permanently. The approaching confrontation would determine whether justice could triumph over coordinated corruption. Silas and Amara approached the Brennan family first, knowing their son's arrest made them most vulnerable to immediate pressure. They found Robert Brennan repairing his fence while his wife Maria hung laundry behind their modest farmhouse. Amara closed her eyes and focused her abilities on the family's immediate future. The vision showed Sheriff Marsh arriving at sunset with additional charges against their son. The accusations would escalate from petty theft to assault, carrying penalties that would destroy the boy's future unless his parents reconsidered their land sale decision. She described the specific details to Robert Brennan, including the sheriff's exact words and the fabricated evidence he would present. The farmer listened with skepticism until she mentioned that Marsh would claim his son had attacked Miss Grayson's nephew during a dispute over a girl. Robert's expression changed when she provided details about the alleged incident that hadn't been mentioned in the original charges. The specificity of her predictions and her knowledge of information not yet public convinced him that something extraordinary was happening. Maria Brennan joined the conversation when she overheard Amara describing the pressure tactics being used against resistant families. She recognized the pattern from their own recent experiences with increasingly aggressive purchase offers and subtle community ostracism. Silas showed them his documented evidence connecting property transfers to family disappearances across the region. The written proof supported Amara's supernatural revelations with concrete facts about timing, methods, and financial beneficiaries. The Brennan family agreed to help after Robert verified one of Amara's immediate predictions. She had told him that Dr. Fletcher would visit his neighbor within the hour to discuss medical concerns about exposure to corrupting influences. The doctor arrived exactly when predicted, carrying the message Amara had described. Their next stop brought them to Samuel Tucker's isolated cabin in the wooded hills east of town. The elderly prospector lived alone with his memories and his stubborn refusal to sell mineral rights that blocked crucial development plans. Tucker's initial reaction involved reaching for his shotgun and ordering them off his property. His paranoia had been earned through months of subtle harassment and increasingly direct threats from various representatives of progress and community welfare. Amara's vision showed him the planned staging of his death as a mining accident in his own tunnel system. Sheriff Marsh would collapse specific sections to create a believable cave-in while ensuring no evidence remained of the murder. The mineral rights would transfer to his nephew, who had already agreed to sell them immediately. The old prospector's attitude shifted when Amara described details about his property that outsiders couldn't know. She mentioned hidden veins of silver he had never reported and secret caches of supplies he kept for emergencies. Her knowledge convinced him that her abilities were genuine. Tucker revealed that men had been watching his cabin from the tree line for weeks. They thought their surveillance was subtle, but his years in the wilderness had taught him to notice unnatural disturbances in animal behavior and forest sounds. His agreement to join their cause brought valuable skills in wilderness survival and intimate knowledge of the terrain around Copper Ridge. His tunnel system could provide hidden movement and emergency shelter if their confrontation with the conspiracy required tactical advantages. Widow Martinez proved the most difficult to convince because her late husband's debts had created desperate financial pressure. The bank had accelerated collection schedules while simultaneously offering to purchase her land at prices that would clear her obligations and provide modest security. Amara's visions revealed the calculated timing of these pressures. The bank had purchased her husband's debts from multiple creditors, specifically to create coordinated financial desperation. The seemingly generous land offer was designed to appear as salvation rather than theft. The vision also showed Martinez's planned elimination if she continued to resist. An accidental fire would claim her life and destroy property records, allowing the land transfer to proceed through forged documents and cooperative witnesses. Maria Martinez broke down when Amara described specific details about her husband's final days that only family members could know. The supernatural knowledge convinced her that higher powers were revealing hidden truths about the corruption threatening her community. Her participation brought crucial social connections and respectability that would help their cause gain broader community support. As a respected widow and longtime resident, her word carried weight with families who might dismiss accusations from the cursed girl and silent cowboy. The alliance of 5 people began planning their response to the conspiracy's immediate threat. Amara's visions provided detailed intelligence about Sheriff Marsh's plans for eliminating them at the old mine shaft. The confrontation was scheduled for midnight, when the town would be asleep and witnesses unavailable. Silas proposed using their advanced knowledge to turn the planned ambush into an opportunity for gathering irrefutable evidence. They would document the conspiracy's methods while protecting themselves through careful preparation and strategic positioning. Tucker's mining expertise would help them navigate the underground tunnels safely while avoiding the planned cave-in areas. The Brennan family would position themselves as hidden witnesses to record events from concealed locations. Martinez would remain in town to raise alarm if the confrontation went wrong. Amara focused her abilities on predicting the exact sequence of events planned for their elimination. She saw Sheriff Marsh arriving with 3 deputized accomplices carrying shovels and explosive charges. Their conversation would reveal details about previous murders and the broader conspiracy's scope. The vision showed Miss Grayson arriving later to supervise the evidence destruction and prepare the cover story that would explain their disappearance. Her presence would provide the final proof needed to expose the conspiracy's leadership and methods. They spent the afternoon preparing equipment and establishing communication signals for their coordinated response. The confrontation would either expose the conspiracy completely or result in their deaths alongside the other hidden victims. Evening approached with the weight of justice hanging in the balance. Tucker led Silas and Amara through his hidden tunnel network to reach the old mine shaft without detection. The underground passages connected to the main mining complex through forgotten maintenance shafts that predated the official closure. They positioned themselves where they could observe and record the planned confrontation without being discovered. The Brennan family took concealed positions in the tree line surrounding the mine entrance. Robert carried a borrowed rifle for protection, while Maria documented everything in a detailed written account that could serve as legal testimony. Their son remained safely hidden in town under the protection of sympathetic neighbors. Widow Martinez stayed in Copper Ridge to monitor activity and raise alarm if necessary. Her respected position in the community gave her credibility that would be crucial if they needed to rally additional support quickly. Sheriff Marsh arrived precisely at midnight with 3 men carrying mining equipment and explosive charges. Their conversation revealed the systematic nature of their elimination campaigns and specific details about previous victims buried in the same location. The sheriff discussed techniques they had refined through experience with resistant families. He mentioned the Patterson elimination as a successful example of their methods and referenced similar operations in neighboring counties that had cleared problematic landowners efficiently. His accomplices showed familiarity with their assigned tasks. suggesting this wasn't their first coordinated murder. They discussed timing for the explosive charges and procedures for ensuring no evidence would survive the staged cave-in that would claim Silas and Amara's lives. Miss Grayson arrived 30 minutes later to supervise the final preparations. Her presence confirmed her leadership role in the conspiracy and provided the direct evidence needed to expose her involvement in multiple murders. She carried documents detailing the broader land acquisition scheme and communication records with railroad company representatives. Her casual discussion of previous eliminations revealed the full scope of the conspiracy across multiple counties and dozens of murdered families. The evidence gathering continued for 2 hours as the conspirators prepared their trap and discussed their methods openly. They believed themselves safely isolated and spoke freely about techniques, previous successes, and future targets scheduled for similar treatment. Amara's abilities allowed her to sense the approach of additional threats before they became visible. She warned Silas about 2 more men approaching from the Eastern Trail who would complete the elimination team and provide additional witnesses to the staged accident. The new arrivals brought final supplies and updated intelligence about potential complications from their investigation activities. Their conversation revealed that other community members had begun asking questions about the missing families and strange coincidences surrounding property transfers. Tucker used his knowledge of the underground system to guide them closer to the burial sites the conspirators discussed. The hidden graves contained evidence that would prove the systematic murder of resistant landowners and provide names of victims whose disappearances had been officially explained as voluntary relocations. The gathering evidence reached a critical mass when Miss Grayson produced correspondence with railroad company officials detailing payment schedules for completed eliminations. The financial records proved the conspiracy's scope and connected local murders to corporate interests spanning multiple states. Sheriff Marsh's discussion of future targets revealed plans to expand operations to additional counties along the railroad route. The systematic elimination campaign was designed to continue for another 2 years until all necessary properties were acquired through intimidation or murder. Robert Brennan's documentation captured specific names, dates, and methods that would provide prosecutors with detailed evidence for multiple murder charges. His written account included direct quotes from the conspirators about their previous crimes and planned future eliminations. The moment for action arrived when the conspirators finished their preparations and began calling for Silas and Amara to surrender. Their demands revealed they knew about the investigation and intended to extract information about potential allies before completing the murders. Instead of emerging for the planned ambush, the allied families implemented their coordinated response. Tucker triggered carefully placed charges that sealed the conspirators inside the mine complex without causing fatal injuries. The controlled collapse trapped them with their evidence and prevented any escape or destruction of documentation. Martinez arrived with a group of concerned citizens she had rallied using evidence of the conspiracy's activities. The crowd included families who had received pressure to sell their properties and community members who had questioned the official explanations for missing neighbors. The trapped conspirators found themselves surrounded by witnesses and evidence that would end their systematic elimination campaign permanently. Their own documents and recorded conversations provided prosecutors with overwhelming proof of their crimes. The legal proceedings that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy across multiple counties and exposed corruption reaching into state government and corporate boardrooms. Dozens of missing families received justice while their murderers faced appropriate consequences through proper legal channels. Amara's supernatural abilities became community assets rather than sources of fear. Her visions helped locate additional burial sites and identify other victims whose disappearances had never been properly investigated. The gift that had made her damaged goods became the key to healing a wounded region. Silas found new purpose as an advocate for families targeted by systematic corruption. His careful observation skills and written documentation helped expose similar schemes in other territories where railroad expansion had created opportunities for coordinated land theft and murder. The partnership between the Cursed Girl and Silent Cowboy evolved into a respected investigation team that helped communities recognize and resist systematic corruption. Their success in Copper Ridge provided a model for exposing conspiracies that preyed on isolated families and vulnerable landowners. Their cabin became a gathering place where other survivors could share their experiences and find support in rebuilding their lives. The community that had once dismissed them as damaged goods now recognized them as protectors of justice and truth. Amara and Silas proved that society's quick judgments about human worth often missed the greatest strengths and most valuable contributions that unconventional people could offer their communities.